After 35 years of breathing life into a marriage, Leah Wallace heard the words that no woman should ever have to process in the cold light of a Tuesday morning. "I need more than a partner, Leah. I need an inspiration." Those words, delivered over a breakfast she had prepared with the same care she'd shown for 3 decades, felt like a physical eviction from her own skin. Traded for a woman 30 years her junior and treated like an outdated piece of office furniture by her husband's high-priced legal team, Leah left the courthouse with a single bitter consolation prize: the deed to a derelict, salt-crusted lighthouse on a remote, jagged stretch of the Atlantic coast. Her ex-husband, Gordon Foley, was a man who measured the weight of a soul in glass skyscrapers and luxury chronographs. He laughed as she signed the final papers in that mahogany row office. He truly believed Leah would spend her remaining years in shivering isolation, listening to the waves mock her and fading into the Atlantic fog. He saw her as a biological clock that had simply run out of batteries. But what that arrogant man didn't realize was that in trying to exile her to the edge of the world, he had handed Leah the key to a kingdom he couldn't even imagine. "Stay with me until the very end, because you're about to discover how a woman deemed obsolete by the man she built became the guardian of a treasure that brought a corporate empire to its knees." If you believe that a woman's value only increases with the wisdom of time and that true justice isn't bought, but earned, subscribe to this channel right now. Follow this journey of a soul being scrubbed clean by the sea. Leah Wallace had been 58 years old for exactly 22 days when her world was systematically dismantled. She had spent her life as the invisible architect. While Gordon was the face of the Foley Group, Leah was the one who remembered the names of the investors' children, the one who edited his speeches until they had a pulse, and the one who turned a cold house into a sanctuary that fueled his ambition. The house was immaculate, as it always was. She had spent 35 years perfecting the art of the supportive wife, raising their son, Carson Patton, to be a man of high society. She thought she had done everything right. But the signs had been there, whispering from the shadows of his late-night board meetings and the sudden, aggressive scent of a cologne she hadn't bought for him. That morning, Gordon appeared in a designer tracksuit that looked desperate on a man of 60. "We need to talk," he said, refusing to meet her eyes. He sat across from her, not beside her, a detail that would burn into Leah's memory forever. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "I've met someone who matches my energy. Alyssa Duke. She's 30, she's a visionary, and she makes me feel like I'm just starting. You've become a museum piece, Leah. A memory of my past. I want to live in the future." The cruelty was surgical. Gordon's lawyers were predators who viewed 35 years of domestic labor as a lifestyle choice, with a financial value of 0. They argued that the mansion, the cars, and the offshore accounts were the sole result of Gordon's brilliance. Leah, they claimed, had merely been a passenger. Even their son, Carson, stayed neutral. He didn't want to jeopardize his seat at the Foley Group table. His neutrality felt like a secondary abandonment, a quiet confirmation that at 58, Leah was indeed a liability. At the final hearing, under a sky the color of lead, Gordon's lead attorney tossed a weathered folder onto the table. "There is the Beacon Point property," the lawyer said with a smirk. "An old lighthouse Gordon's eccentric uncle left him 20 years ago. It's a liability, rotting wood, no electricity, miles from the nearest paved road. We propose deeding it to Mrs. Wallace as a gesture of goodwill." Gordon leaned over, his voice a low hiss. "Go be the lady of the lamp, Leah. Try not to let the Atlantic swallow you whole on the first night." Alyssa Duke, sitting beside him in a dress that cost more than Leah's new monthly budget, giggled into her manicured hand. Leah looked at the deed. She had no home, a meager 5-year alimony pittance, and a son who wouldn't look her in the eye. "I'll take it," she said, her voice finally finding its edge. She spent her last week in the mansion packing 4 decades of memories into an old SUV. Her friends from the country club were suddenly very busy. They looked at her with that toxic mix of pity and relief. Thankful it wasn't them, but certain that Leah was finished. Carson offered her a guest room in his city condo, but his voice was tight with the fear of a permanent burden. "I'm going to the light, Carson," she told him. "Mom, that place is a tomb," he replied. "Then it will suit my current social standing perfectly," she said, and drove away without looking back. The drive to Beacon Point took 6 hours, but it felt like traveling back a century. As the gleaming glass towers of the city faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by stunted pines and salt-blasted shrubs, Leah felt a strange, cold lightness in her chest. When she finally reached the end of the dirt track, the lighthouse stood before her, a lonely finger of white stone pointing at a bruised Atlantic sky. It was far worse than the photos. The iron gallery at the top was a lattice of orange rust. The glass panes of the lantern room were jagged teeth, and the keeper's cottage looked like it was bowing under the weight of 1,000 storms. "Welcome home, Leah," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the roar of the surf. She spent her first night on the floor of the cottage in a sub-zero sleeping bag. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed through the gaps in the window frames, a haunting, high-pitched wail that sounded like the ghost of the woman she used to be. For hours, she lay awake, shivering, her mind replaying the image of Gordon and Alyssa laughing in that courtroom. He wants me to break, she realized. He chose this place specifically because he thought the isolation would finish what the divorce started. But as the sun rose over the Atlantic, a bleeding, magnificent orange that no city skyscraper could ever capture, Leah felt a surge of defiance. She wasn't a museum piece. She was a survivor. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with a bucket, a scrub brush, and a gallon of bleach. Leah used the last of her secret savings, money she had quietly tucked away from grocery budgets over 30 years, to buy a generator, basic power tools, and industrial-grade paint. The local villagers at the docks watched her with a mixture of amusement and pity. They called her the Lady of the Light, a nickname meant to be a joke. To them, she was just another city divorcee playing at a simple life, until the first winter gale sent her running back to a condo. But Leah didn't run. She learned how to scrape layers of lead paint until her shoulders burned. She learned how to mix mortar to fill the cracks in the foundation. She climbed the winding iron stairs of the Lighthouse Tower 40 times a day, carrying supplies that left her hands bloodied and raw. Her expensive silk blouses were replaced by heavy flannel and work boots. Her manicured nails were cut short and stained with grease. One afternoon, while she was hauling a rotted timber out of the cottage, her son Carson called. "Dad says you're living like a squatter, Mom," he said, his voice dripping with misplaced concern. "He's offering to buy the property back from you for $50,000. It would be enough for a down payment on a nice senior living community in the suburbs." Leah looked at her reflection in a piece of cracked glass. She was thinner, tan from the salt air sun, and her eyes had a sharpness she hadn't seen in decades. "Tell your father that $50,000 wouldn't even cover the cost of the soul he sold. I'm staying, Carson." It was the 6th month, the height of a humid, salt-thick August. Leah was working in the base of the Lighthouse Tower, trying to address a persistent dampness in the floorboards. She suspected a leak in the cistern, but as she pried up a section of waterlogged oak, the wood didn't just splinter, it gave way entirely. Her crowbar vanished into a dark void. Heart hammering, Leah fetched her industrial flashlight. She expected to see a crawl space filled with brackish water or a nest of coastal rats. Instead, the beam of light hit the dull glint of metal. Buried 2 feet deep, bolted directly into the granite bedrock of the coast, was a heavy, iron-bound sea chest. The lock was a rusted mass of saltwater corrosion, but the hinges were made of thick, blackened brass. It took Leah 3 hours of agonizing labor to clear the debris and hack through the lock. When the lid finally creaked open, the smell of old parchment and cedar filled the small room. There was no gold. There were no jewels. Inside were hundreds of hand-drawn maps and leather-bound journals belonging to Gordon's great-uncle, Silas Foley, the original keeper of the light. Silas had been a disgraced geologist before he took the post, a man the family called mad. As Leah spread the maps out on the floor, her breath hitched. These weren't just navigational charts. They were detailed geological surveys of the continental shelf stretching 3 miles out from the lighthouse. Silas had found something, a massive subterranean anomaly that modern technology in his time couldn't name. But tucked into the very back of the chest was a more recent folder. It contained documents from 5 years ago, core sample results and water table analyses commissioned by Gordon's legal team, but never filed. Leah realized with a jolt of adrenaline that Gordon knew there was something here, but he had miscalculated. He thought the treasure was out at sea, under federal jurisdiction. He hadn't realized that the vein, a massive, high-purity deposit of lithium and rare earth minerals, originated directly beneath the lighthouse foundation. Because of the ancient, oddly worded deed Gordon had handed her to be cruel, Leah didn't just own a lighthouse. She owned the gatekeeper, rights to the most valuable mineral strike on the East Coast. Gordon hadn't just thrown her away. He had handed her the detonator to his own destruction. Leah transforms from a woman in exile to a silent power player, using her discovery to build a digital community and a corporate trap for the man who discarded her. Leah didn't rush to the press. She didn't call the police or a high-priced surveyor. Instead, she sat in the flickering light of her small generator-powered lamp and thought about her 35 years with Gordon. She had been his strategist. She had seen how he moved, always aggressive, always looking for the next kill, but prone to overlooking the small details. She decided to play a long, quiet game. Under the pseudonym, The Keeper, Leah started a blog and a video series titled The Lighthouse Reclaimed. At first, it was just grainy footage of her scraping rust and the sound of the wind. She spoke to the camera with a voice that was calm, weathered, and undeniably authoritative. She spoke to women who felt invisible, women who had been told their use-by date had passed. They think that by removing the ornaments of our lives, the houses, the titles, the husbands, they are removing our power, she said in one video that went viral. But they forget that the lighthouse is most powerful when it stands alone against the storm. Within months, she had 500,000 followers. She wasn't just a woman fixing a building. She was a symbol of a demographic the world usually ignored. But while she was filming tutorials on masonry, she was also spending her nights studying mineral law. By the end of the first year, the Foley Group was in trouble. Gordon had overleveraged the company to buy a massive tract of land adjacent to Beacon Point. He knew there was something in the ground. His uncle's old whispers had finally reached his ears. But he assumed the lighthouse was just a scenic obstacle. He planned to strip mine the surrounding hills and leave Leah sitting on a literal island of rock while he extracted the wealth from the perimeter. He didn't know that the heart of the deposit, the motherlode that made the rest of the land viable, was tucked directly under Leah's kitchen floor. Without access to her specific plot for core drilling and ventilation shafts, his surrounding land was $1 billion paperweight. Then came the day Gordon's new world began to crack. Alyssa Duke, bored with the quiet life Gordon had promised her and realizing the Foley Group's liquid assets were drying up, was spotted at a gala with a younger venture capitalist. The image of Gordon, looking flushed and desperate in the background of a tabloid photo, was Leah's signal. It was time. The confrontation didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened on the wind-swept cliff of Beacon Point. Gordon arrived in a sleek black SUV that looked entirely out of place in the mud. He stepped out, his expensive shoes immediately ruined by the salt marsh. He looked at the lighthouse, which was now gleaming white, its lantern room restored and shining like a diamond in the sun. "Leah," he said, trying to summon his old corporate swagger. "I've been watching your little internet project. Impressive. But let's be adults. I'm moving forward with the Lithium Coast project. I'm prepared to offer you $3 million for this rock. That's more than you'd see in 10 lifetimes of alimony." Leah didn't even look up from the net she was mending. "The property isn't for sale, Gordon. Don't be difficult. You're sitting on a liability. I have the mineral rights to the entire surrounding area. I can build a wall around you. I can make this place unlivable." Leah stood up. She looked taller than he remembered. The softness was gone, replaced by a lean, hardened grace. "You should have checked the deed your uncle left, Gordon. And you certainly should have checked the easement and access clauses you signed over to me at the courthouse." She handed him a folder. "Because this lighthouse is a protected historical landmark, which I registered 6 months ago, and because I own the apex rights to the mineral vein, you cannot drill a single inch on your land without my written permission. My land is the gatekeeper. Your $1 billion investment? It's just a very expensive place to go hiking." Gordon's face went from pale to a terrifying shade of purple. You knew? You've known this whole time." "I knew the moment I stopped looking at myself through your eyes," Leah said. "You saw an old woman and a pile of rubble. I saw an opportunity and a foundation." The Foley Group collapsed 3 months later. Gordon was forced to sell his surrounding land to a conservation trust, at a massive loss, just to stay out of bankruptcy. Alyssa Duke left him before the ink was dry on the liquidation papers. Leah Wallace didn't become a billionaire. She didn't want to. She leased the mineral rights to a green energy consortium that used non-invasive extraction methods, ensuring she stayed wealthy enough to fund her true passion, a foundation that provides legal and housing support for women over 50 who have been erased by the system. She still lives in the Lighthouse. Every night, she climbs the stairs to the lantern room and watches the light sweep across the dark Atlantic. They will tell you that the world belongs to the young, the loud, and the aggressive. They will tell you that once you've served your purpose, you should fade quietly into the background. But Leah's story proves that the greatest power isn't found in what you own. It's found in what you refuse to give up. Gordon Foley lost everything because he couldn't see the value in the woman who built him. He looked at a lighthouse and saw a ruin. Leah looked at a ruin and saw a light. Your life isn't over when someone else decides they're done with you. That is simply the moment the fog clears so you can finally see the horizon. What part of your life is waiting to be reclaimed? Don't wait for permission to shine. Start rebuilding your own light today. If this story reminded you of your own strength, hit the like button and share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Subscribe to join our community of keepers. Remember, what they call your ending is only your first chapter.